We take you on a journey to some of the world's most notorious castles and uncover some of their darkest secrets. We go ghost hunting in the UK to see if all that goes bump in the night is supernatural.
Something's not right, I have to say. It's giving me the spooks already.
We explore the wilds of Romania and the legend that inspired a horror masterpiece.
This is a really savage place, and its history is just savage. The only difference is there's not anybody out there impaling anyone anymore.
And we reveal how a king was betrayed, imprisoned, and finally murdered in one of the bloodiest events in British history. Throughout history, they have been at the center of some of the bloodiest and most vicious battles. We reveal the secrets behind some of the world's most notorious castles. English castles have a reputation for bloodshed, and Berkeley Castle is one that has witnessed some of the bloodiest events in history. It was here in the 14th century that Edward II, the ruling king, was murdered on the orders of his wife and her lover. Set within sight of the River Severn in Gloucester, West England, Berkeley Castle has been owned by the Berkeley family since the 1100s. They are one of the most powerful and important families in British history. Son and heir, Charles Berkeley, took us on an exclusive tour of his ancestral home.
We want to preserve it for generations of Berkeleys to come. It stood for 800 years, and there's been a little bit of history in each of those 100 years, which has contributed towards, the history of this country.
But the family's influence isn't unique just to Britain. It stretches across the Atlantic as well.
We're looking at George Cranfield Berkeley. He was the younger son of the 4th Earl of Berkeley, and he went on to become appointed Vice Admiral of the Halifax Station in America, where he was responsible for sinking the Chesapeake and the Leopold ships off Washington Bay, and this was one of the major causes of the 1812 war in America. Of course, this was a major diplomatic blunder by the English, and so he was responsible for that.
Although the family has lent its name to some of the world's most well-known institutions and landmarks, including Berkeley Square in London and Berkeley College in San Francisco, the family home is more famous for the grisly events of 1327.
The main story in here is the imprisonment and murder of Edward II. There's a cell here where Edward was imprisoned.
Edward II, King of England, was betrayed by his wife, Queen Isabella, and her lover, Roger Mortimer, who wanted power for themselves. Back in the 14th century, this was made easier by Edward's poor reputation, as the castle's archivist David Smith has discovered.
Edward had been a weak king, his father had been the hammer of the Scots, and he had lost the Scottish wars, he'd lost Bannockburn. He'd not been particularly favoured by the populace at large.
Amazingly, the Berkeley family has records dating back over 850 years, and these show that in 1327, they sided with the Queen in a rebellion against her husband, the King. While Queen Isabella took control of the country, her husband was caught and imprisoned at a secret location. We can reveal today that secret location was Berkeley Castle.
Berkeley was an obvious spot. It was a good stronghold to move the king to, and in April 1327 they moved Edward, and he was kept here until his murder on the 22nd of September 1327.
Edward was imprisoned in the castle's most secure room, the dungeon chamber. But he didn't go without luxury. He was allowed some servants and wasn't kept in chains.
There are a few records in the castle which survive from that period, and one of those is an account of the local manors which supplied provisions to the castle. We know that an allowance of £5 a day was allowed for maintaining the former king at Berkeley. That was a colossal sum of money. So initially, anyway, he lived in some state.
As the country waited to hear news of the missing king, local gossip let slip where he was being held. And we can reveal a secret that has been kept hidden for centuries. Edward II actually escaped from his prison, a fact very few know. A mob led by 2 friars broke into the castle, overpowered Edward's guards, and freed him. They fled to a neighboring county, but he was recognized, and after being on the run for only a few days, he was recaptured by the Queen's men.
The whole episode must have been a tremendous shock. They weren't expecting a stronghold like this to be broken into and the king to be removed. So from August 1327, he was obviously seen as a serious political liability.
Most of England was totally unaware of the events taking place at the castle, and the Queen could have faced a rebellion if the truth was fully revealed. The history books record what apparently happened next.
This passage here gives the traditional account of the king's imprisonment and death. He was miserably tormented many days together and well nigh suffocated therewith. The said Sir John Maltravers and Sir Thomas Gurney and their accomplices rushed in the night time into his chamber with great and heavy feather beds, smothered him, thrusting an hollow instrument like the end of a trumpet or glister pipe into his fundament, and through it a red-hot iron up into his bowels, whereby he ended his life with a lamentable loud cry.
The painful murder of Edward II using a red-hot poker was unique in both its method and its victim. It is a legend that has been hard for the Berkeley family to conceal, and one that their ancestors had a hand in.
No other king was murdered in such a way in a castle like this. Hearing the story from my father and other people, and coming round with school friends, I came round with a school visit, and all my friends rushed to see the cell. And I remember being excited myself, you know, when the story was being told, and thinking, God, I actually live in a place where a king was imprisoned. And it's amazing to think that these things happened in those days. But it's not frightening for me, but there's certainly been nights when I've been here by myself when I've thought of these things.
The Berkeley family and castle are as historically important to Britain as the royal family. Although the castle's royal connection is one whose bloody nature is something they might rather want to forget about. Edinburgh, capital of Scotland and home to one of the bloodiest events in Scottish history. Situated on the banks of the River Forth, Edinburgh has played an important role in both the country's defense and history.
You can see buildings that are all the way from almost 1,000 years old to only 100 years old. So that's something that makes it really unique.
One of the city's oldest buildings is its castle, situated in the heart of the capital. It attracts more than 1 million visitors every year, making it Scotland's top tourist attraction. But visitors might be shocked to learn that the castle actually plugs a dormant volcano. Thousands of years ago, the whole of the Edinburgh area was a mass of volcanic activity. Today, you can still see the remains of old lava flows within the castle walls.
Thank God they're dormant.
Yes.
But these aren't the only explosive events Edinburgh Castle is witness to. At 1 p.m. every day, visitors at the castle can witness the firing of the castle gun. Tam Mackay is responsible for any shots fired within the castle walls.
Prior to firing the light gun, I have to check the ammunition. As it's electronic ammunition, we've got to be very careful with it. It is pretty dangerous stuff. So it's got to be handled just the same you would as in live ammunition.
Opposite the castle on the far side of Edinburgh is a time ball. At exactly the same moment that the gun is fired, the time ball drops. Throughout history, the castle has witnessed many explosive events, but in 1440, it was witness to murder. At that time, the Scottish people were ruled by King James II. He was only 10 years old, though, so he was assisted by the Chancellor, Lord Crichton. But Crichton wasn't to be trusted, and eventually, this manifested itself into Scotland's most notorious murder, now known as the Black Bull's Dinner. Dr. Michael Brown has written extensively about those bloody events.
The Black Dinner of 1440 was a shocking event in the history of late medieval Scotland.
It was late November 1440 when the boy king threw a royal banquet. Among other guests were the Douglas brothers. Because of the sudden death of their father, the two young sons suddenly found themselves as head of a powerful family.
By the 1440s, they, as much as the Stuart kings, like James II, could claim to be the legitimate defenders of Scotland.
The banquet was in full swing and had gone without incident until the final course, when a black bull's head was laid in front of the Douglases. Back in 1440, this was a sign of impending death. The young boys would have had no illusions as to their fate.
The two teenage noblemen were immediately arrested, taken outside, and beheaded, possibly in the castle courtyard.
The events of that meal tainted Edinburgh Castle with a bloody past and left Scotland with a paranoid perpetrator whose personal power ensured he was never brought to justice.
William Lord Crichton, Chancellor of Scotland, was the man whom most contemporaries saw as responsible for the Black Dinner. He regarded the Earl of Douglas, a man of much greater private resources in lands and in followers, as being a dangerous rival, a young man whose political attitudes were unknown and who Crichton had to strike at before he was attacked himself.
The Black Bull's Dinner is considered to be the most shocking double murder within Scottish history. The young age of the victims and speed at which they were disposed of struck fear into the hearts of a nation. Today, the castle remains an important national symbol for Scotland and one of the most distinctive castles in the world. Coming up on Notorious Castles, we join a group of American ghost hunters as they come to terms with the spooky events going on in mainland Britain.
I want to see a ghost, but I don't, you know what I mean?
Britain is crawling with castles that have stood the test of time, and the amount of alleged paranormal activity within their walls has resulted in several claiming to be the most haunted places in the country. So we decided to investigate these claims. The Castle of St. Bravils in Gloucestershire has a deep dungeon that has been home to many rotting corpses of past prisoners. The room above the dungeon has allegedly experienced extensive paranormal activity, but visiting ghost hunters have failed to find any concrete proof. Edinburgh Castle has witnessed both murder and torture. It seems to be a prime location for paranormal activity, and over the past 2 years, scientists have investigated its claims, but produced no conclusive evidence. But it's the tip of Cornwall in England that attracts the most ghostly attention. Pengersick Castle claims to be one of the most haunted castles in Britain.
The amount of history that's happened here is very extensive, very bloody, a lot of murders, very tragic events. A lot of people suggest that because of this, some of the spirits, the ghosts, are still here.
Lying at the heart of the sleepy village of Provence, Pengersick Castle has stood since the 12th century and is by far the oldest building in the area. It's claimed that the castle's bloody past has trapped a large number of ghosts within its walls. Local paranormal researcher Ian Atticott has taken a keen interest in the castle and the eerie goings-on. Every month, he organizes a ghost night for those interested and brave enough to go ghost busting.
Members of the public come here and experience the place for themselves, and we lead them around to all the, if you like, the haunted areas, the active places, to see what they can actually pick up for themselves. And extraordinarily, people have seen ghosts, they've had strange feelings, heard sounds, things have been recorded on tape. An amazing amount of evidence.
The castle has been witness to various crimes and murders, and the unfortunate death of a teenage girl is said to have left evidence of a permanent ghostly resident.
Several centuries ago, there was a 13-year-old girl who lived here at Pengersick Castle, and it said that she was very, very fond of dancing. In fact, one day she came up here and was dancing on these very battlements, and it said that there was a very nasty wind got up, lifted her up by her dress, and tragically she was blown over the battlement walls, falling to her death. A lot of people claim that they're often grabbed hold and almost spun around by some unseen presence.
Visitors to the castle claim to have witnessed strange orbs of light shooting down from the battlements. Some think they may have been lucky enough to catch the phenomenon on film. Photographs taken by previous ghost hunters have produced some unusual results. We followed a group of inquisitive American ghost hunters as they spent a night at the castle. We also enlisted the help of psychologist and paranormal skeptic Professor Matt Smith and thermo-imaging expert David Blaine. He brought along his specialist equipment and rigged it in the master bedroom, which is said to be a prime location for ghostly experiences.
This is state-of-the-art thermal imaging camera. It's classed as military equipment. This is going to be an interesting scenario tonight. We've set the camera up, hopefully, to pan the area to pick up any heat or, conversely, any cold.
As soon as the temperature changes in the room, our equipment kicks in. This is the oldest part of the castle, and previous ghost hunters have described a drop in temperature before they've experienced a supernatural presence. Hopefully, the thermo-imaging camera will help us detect anything in the room that hasn't been invited. And immediately, things start to happen.
This is weird. Well, we seem to have lost our image. This is not right. What's happened on our recording equipment, that's actually gone down. Very unusual. I've got something back. Really weird. I've never experienced anything like this. This is... something's not right, I have to say. It's giving me the spooks already.
The onboard computer has had its C drive wiped, something that is not meant to be possible with this military equipment. After some perseverance, it is brought back online, but the glitch remains unexplainable.
I'm happy now, and I'm going to leave it set up so nothing can go wrong.
With the night drawing in, our ghost hunters get to work.
This place has so much energy. Of course, there's going to be, things here and, people experiencing things here.
I want to see what you can experience or pick up by yourself. And also, do talk to me. I can't say that enough. Whatever it is you're feeling or whatever you're picking up, please do talk to me, and I will explain or tell you that it's something that we can explain very quickly.
I want to see a ghost, but I don't, you know what I mean? But I do think that there is something still out there, remnants of people that once were here, definitely.
Did anybody feel anything particularly while they were standing over there?
Colder, a lot colder.
Whereabouts was it cold?
Look, if you walk around from there, if you walk around this way.
There is a story here which claims that a lot of people have been here in Pengersic, in this area, or sometimes looking down from up there, and they've actually claimed to see a man walking out from this corner in a line straight along there, out through this way, and out through the wall over there.
The group is at the site of the castle's most commonly spotted ghost, the Monk of Pengersic. Back in 1330, the castle was owned by Henry Pengersic. At that time, monks were sent out by the church to visit wealthy landowners and collect a one-off cash donation. This money would then go towards the general upkeep of the church. However, when Henry was approached for his payment, he took offense. Rather than pay, Henry attacked the monk on the steps of the castle. The money was never collected, and instead, the monk died from his injuries.
Ever since, people have claimed to have seen a phantom monk here in Pengersic Castle itself, and there's been a wide range of sightings, areas in the grounds, in the castle itself. There's even a cottage nearby where a man has several times claimed to have seen a ghost dressed exactly like a monk.
The slain monk is said to be one of more than 20 ghosts that inhabit the castle and its grounds. Unperturbed, the group continues to explore the depths of the garden and its most haunted part.
This is one of the most personally intriguing places that I've ever come across here in Pengersic. The reason being, there was one particular night when we were here, on a ghost night, And suddenly somebody saw something moving just here in this particular corner.
Here's a world exclusive. Watch closely at this never-seen-before amateur footage from a previous ghost hunt at the castle. The recording apparently captured ghostly images moving quickly across the ground like rats.
Look, can you see it? There.
It was like shadows moving around on the floor. And as we looked closer, it looked like, well, rats, rodents, small creatures.
There's loads now. There's loads.
Now, everybody who was here saw this, over 20 people.
Yeah, I'm running over your feet as well.
Just rats running around.
Can you see
They're
them?
not, they're definitely rats, but there's nothing there.
You know, we tried to think maybe it was something crawling on the torches or something in the trees. We soon ruled all of these things out.
There's plenty, look, there's loads.
Here's over there.
I thought it was me at first. I thought it was
Oh, well done.
There may be a rational explanation. I'm willing to admit that. In fact, I'm almost hoping there is one because I can't come up with one.
Is this world exclusive, conclusive proof of ghosts at the castle? Only you can decide.
Okay? Yeah. How are you all feeling?
Good. Freaked.
Freaked? Really?
The group may be freaked, but they still haven't found their ghost. So it's indoors for more spirit searching with castle dowser Ron Kirby.
An archaeological dowser is no different from a dowser who looks for water. It's just that what you're looking for, you're going back into history.
Our thermal imaging camera is set up in this room. You can clearly see the heat that our ghost hunters give off. The camera sensors picks this up and translates it into colors. The color bar to the right of the screen indicates hottest to coldest, with white being hottest and purple being the coldest. Objects, such as the bed, are cold and should remain either a deep blue or purple. But if someone touches an object, they will momentarily leave a heat mark on its surface that the camera will detect. The group try their hands at dowsing, but then our camera picks up a strange image. The vase at the back of the room, without any interference, starts to fluctuate in temperature. It becomes gradually hotter. Changes in temperature like this are often described when people experience something like a supernatural presence.
Can you see the shape there? Look.
Yeah, look, that's absolutely.
The ghost hunters are excited, but our cameraman is freaked.
Putting it all together, you know, you've got to start asking questions, you know, and is it, it's something, how explainable is it?
So we showed the footage to Professor Matt Smith of Liverpool Hope University, who has conducted previous research into ghostly experiences.
Psychologists have long studied why people believe in the paranormal and also the effects of paranormal beliefs. And one thing we found is that people who believe in the paranormal are far more likely to seek a paranormal explanation when faced with ambiguous goings-on. The important point to make about this piece of footage is that it's not part of a controlled scientific experiment. So, for example, you have people walking in and out of the room near to the object, and simply the changes in temperature caused by their bodies may be enough to affect the image that we see.
Professor Smith then studied the amateur footage with ghostly rat figures.
You have actually got some very unusual shadows being cast there, and there's no clear, immediate explanation of what they might be. What I find interesting from a psychological perspective is that once somebody suggests they look like rats scurrying around, then everybody starts to agree, yes, they are rats.
They're definitely rats, but there's nothing
And people
there.
are very quick to be swept away by looking for this paranormal explanation without first really considering other possible non-paranormal explanations.
Pengursik Castle continues to be a firm favorite with all ghost hunters. The grounds have remained as you would have found them centuries ago. And the ghosts help visitors remember its notorious past. Next up, we take you to the home of Dracula and reveal a horror monster whose legacy still survives.
It's like the holiday to undie for.
The most notorious horror story of all time was inspired by the bloody events from within the castles of Romania. Dracula was not only set in Romania, but was actually inspired by one of the country's most feared and bloodthirsty rulers, Vlad Tepes. Back in the 15th century, Romania was a violent and dangerous place to visit, But nowadays, all that remains are chilling reminders across the land of a distant past. We were invited to join a group of American Dracula enthusiasts as they explored the wilds of Romania and the depths of Dracula's depravity.
It's just living out a fantasy. We get to see something that we've read about and we've seen movies about, and now we are here.
In 1897, Bram Stoker published what was to become one of the world's best-known horror novels, Dracula. Travelers throughout the world have been lured to the real-life Gothic horror locations that are featured in the book.
The Dracula tour, it's a great theme tour that attracts the widest variety of people. We get the Gothic people who love the Gothic lifestyle and the Gothic music. We get people who were originally horror monster movie fans, and this definitely gives them something different.
Back in the 15th century, Vlad Tepes was every bit as scary as Dracula, the fictional character he inspired. Like Dracula, Vlad had a thirst for blood. Although he didn't bite his victims' necks, instead displeasing the king became punishable by impaling. Vlad used this method so much that he became known as Vlad the Impaler. It was in the town of Targa Vista that Vlad's true character first came to light. In 1459, shortly after he had taken to the throne, he exacted revenge for the murder of his father and brother. A banquet was organized, and the most powerful families in the country were invited. What the Impaler did on that night made him infamous throughout Europe. As the banquet was in full swing, Vlad pounced. Speed was important. His guards surrounded the guests and placed them under arrest. Some were immediately impaled on stakes. Others he forced to walk over 50 miles to the run-down border castle of Punari. Back in 1459, the trek to the castle was a grueling experience. But Vlad wanted his border defenses improved, and these were the fresh prisoners to do it. Tour guides like Dan Nicolina often bring visitors up to this remote outpost.
This location was a very good position. As you can see around, it's impossible even today to climb.
Today, more than 1,400 steps help visitors reach the castle. But there was no such luxury for Vlad's prisoners back in the 15th century. They had to climb the hill.
These 1,400 steps that we've been climbing today, it's awful. Just took 1 hour for us. Imagine the time without the steps, how long it was.
Within 2 years, Punari Castle had been rebuilt. Hundreds of prisoners had died while constructing Vlad's vision. But today, the castle still stands over 1,200 feet above the valley. Its position is breathtaking. The only way for an attacker to defeat Vlad's improved castle defenses would be by starvation. In 1462, the Turks laid siege to the castle and attempted to do just this. Vlad and his wife found themselves surrounded and outnumbered. But rather than suffer at the hands of their enemy, Vlad's wife threw herself from the battlements.
His wife was very afraid that they don't have any chance, and she didn't want to fall in the hands of the Turkish army and to go in the harem of the Sultan. So she jumped from here.
The cunning Vlad, however, escaped into the surrounding hills. The Impaler was eventually killed in battle against the Turks. On his death, Romania had witnessed enough bloodshed to help his legend survive for centuries. Visitors can still explore his final resting place today. We rejoin the Dracula tour as it takes a short boat ride across the lake to a solitary island and the monastery of Snagoff.
To hear the history of it and to know, the fiction of it and to see the reality of it, frankly, the reality is considerably worse than any fiction that we make up.
But if Vlad's bloodthirsty lifestyle is too tame for your tastes, then you need to experience Romania at a time of year when no soul is safe, Halloween night. The Dracula tour group has eventually reached Transylvania for Halloween night at the Dracula Castle Hotel. They have spent the week working on their outfits and preparing for a feast. And tonight they get the chance to party under Vlad's watchful eye.
You can tell that this is a really savage place and its history is just savage. The only difference is there's not anybody out there impaling anyone anymore.
Well, I've been wanting to come to Transylvania for my whole life, so the fact that it's on Halloween is only even better. You know, what better to do on Halloween?
During the Middle Ages, Halloween night was a significant festival with different connotations for different beliefs. Pagans celebrated the end of summer and the beginning of winter. Christians celebrated All Saints' Day. Today, Halloween is a good excuse for a party. The 30-strong group have certainly made an impression with their Halloween gathering, and the night has just begun.
My wife said to me, let's go as hippies, because there are vampire hippies. Dracula might have bitten someone on the neck in San Francisco one of his flights over.
I love this country. To see all the old churches, cathedrals, castles, everything.
The party has even attracted the attention of the local television station.
It's like the holiday to undie for.
So if you're looking for a holiday that includes untouched scenery, authentic culture, and a history that has inspired a legend, then you couldn't get any better than Romania. There's plenty to explore and even more to experience. Coming up next, we explore the setting for the Harry Potter films.
My 6-year-old cousin thinks that I actually go to Hogwarts school.
But we reveal its blood-curdling secrets. The border between Scotland and England has been witness to more bloody battles than anywhere else in Europe. And it takes a special place to survive centuries of attack and counterattack. Alnwick Castle has done just this, and today it remains as powerful and as inspiring as it was when it was first built over 900 years ago. We were lucky enough to talk privately with its current owner, the Duke of Northumberland.
The Bishop of Durham sold it to my family in 1309, so we've had it for very nearly 700 years. As a child, you don't appreciate it. You treat everything as if it's wallpaper, and an awful lot of paintings around here that are priceless. One didn't realise then. And if you look closely, they're covered in ink stains and water pistol stains that we did as children.
And nowadays, each fall, 50 students from St. Cloud University in Minnesota come to stay at Alnwick.
Most of our students don't come from a place that has a lot of huge visual interest, certainly historical interest. The age and history of it just kind of overpowers you, really. And that's good for the students. They have that opportunity to examine themselves from a different perspective, and that's why we send them abroad.
We came over a hill and we saw the castle like bit by bit, and it was just incredible to see how huge and massive it was. And I just love the fact that I was going to live there for the next 4 months and experience something that no one else could say they experienced.
They took us to our rooms and we walked like through the cobblestone paths and just looking around, and it was just, we were in awe looking at everything. It was just amazing.
The Duke of Northumberland was born in the castle, but nowadays he shares his historic home with the students, the public, and sometimes even the stars. You might recognize the castle from such films as Ivanhoe and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, starring Kevin Costner. But more recently, it was home to an even bigger project, the Harry Potter films.
I remember sitting here in my study looking out while they were filming and seeing broomsticks and small children going by. And you did a double take as you looked out the window, but then you realised they were on cranes and all sorts of wires. But it was wonderful to see it happening. And it brings the place to life. You know, it has a big effect on the town of Alnwick.
You see kids running around with the brooms dressed like constantly and dressed like Harry Potter.
I absolutely love the fact that we are living in the castle where they filmed Harry Potter. My 6-year-old cousin thinks that I actually go to Hogwarts school.
The grounds of the castle are also very special. The Alnwick Garden is one of the most spectacular in all of Europe. It's a peaceful corner of northern England, but it wasn't always like that. Alnwick Castle was built in 1096 as a defense against Scotland. It witnessed its most bloody scenes in the 1100s, when marauding Scottish armies would raid the English border towns in search of a fight and the spoils of war.
Alnwick stood right on the thoroughfare between England and Scotland. It's always been a centre for some form of activity or other, mainly of a bloody nature.
In 1174, William the Lion, King of Scotland, brought his great army down into England and laid siege to mighty Alnwick. He failed to break down the walls or to starve out the troops, and there was a tense stalemate. His frustrated troops inflicted their violence on the surrounding countryside and wreaked havoc.
At all times, plundering is a major part of the whole military ethos.
The Scottish army prevented the English garrison from leaving the castle and protecting the local people. So the small towns and villages bore the brunt of William's rage. Just a few miles away, the church at Warkworth witnessed the true brutality of war, as the Scottish army committed one of the worst atrocities of the conflict.
William the Lion of Scotland brought a great marauding party down into Northumberland and sacked Warkworth. The local villagers, getting wind of that attack, came and took sanctuary in the church. 300 of them were massacred here.
As the Scottish army burnt down the church with the villagers trapped inside, English reinforcements were advancing from the south under cover of thick fog.
Story goes that there were a band of English knights coming from Newcastle. They came at a moment when, in fact, the skies opened and revealed William the Lion pretty well having a picnic.
William the Lion was captured, eventually tried, and sent to mainland Europe where he could cause no trouble. And nowadays, the only reminder of those bloody events is a stone plaque that lies about half a mile from the castle and marks the actual spot where William the Lion was caught by the English.
It's amazing to live in such a peaceful place and to think about centuries that have gone by where there's been bloody wars and castles overtaken, and it's pretty amazing.
The idea of actually this area being under attack or under siege isn't that far from the imagination. I mean, when you look out on the fields out there, you can almost just imagine some sort of huge army standing out there ready to attack it. It's really just incredible.
If you visit Alnwick today, you can enjoy the peace at this splendid castle, home of noblemen, film stars, and college students. But you can never forget the violence of war in centuries gone by. Join us next as we feast on the events of the British Army in Ireland.
The gates were shut, the portcullis was dropped, and it's good night, soldier.
Northern Ireland has had a turbulent history that has created some extraordinary individuals. The county of Antrim can boast more family links to the American presidency than any other area of Europe. Many, such as Andrew Jackson, the 7th American president, are upheld as great Irish descendants. His ancestral roots lie in the seaside town of Carrickfergus. Today, a museum marks his achievements and gives visitors a glimpse of what life was like back in the 19th century. Although the town isn't just famous for its presidents, Carrickfergus Castle, at the mouth of the Belfast Lough, today stands testament to a history littered with bloodshed.
Carrickfergus Castle here has always been the seat of power for this area. If you hold Carrickfergus, you hold the north of Ireland.
The castle is nearly 900 years old and has witnessed English, Scottish, and French attempts to bring their influence to bear on the region. It has also been at the center of some truly horrific acts of war, when honorable soldiers have turned into pure animals. Because it was here, back in the 14th century, that a garrison of English soldiers, in the face of adversity, turned to cannibalism, eating their Scottish prisoners. The English army, led by Lord William Maudeville, managed to take refuge at the castle after being defeated in battle by the Scots at the beginning of 1315. Immediately, the Scottish army laid siege to the castle.
Initially, there would have been plenty of food, and they also have that vital element, which is the fresh water coming up through the well in the middle of the castle here.
As the siege stretched from days into weeks, into months, the English army inside the castle began to run out of food. Desperation took hold. 7 months into the siege, the English decided to break the deadlock. The commander, Lord Maudeville, led a surprise attack, but Scottish reinforcements counterattacked. Lord Maudeville was killed. The English raiding party retreated back towards the castle, but with the enemy following close behind, the castle was forced to draw up the bridge, leaving the retreating troops to be slaughtered outside.
Obviously, somebody gave the command, pull the drawbridge in, and as was expected, they got chopped to bits. And de Manville was killed in this skirmishing as well, and his head was chopped off, and it was put in a barrel of salt and taken back to prove that the man was dead.
The English had to play dirty if they were to survive. The following month, they agreed to surrender. When the Scottish army sent an advance party of 30 men to take possession of the castle, the English instead took them prisoner.
Once they were through the gates, I think probably the gates were shut, the portcullis was dropped, and it's good night, soldier.
Things were desperate inside the castle. The English commander was dead. There had been no reinforcements for months, and there was finally no food. The English had eaten everything in the castle. What they did next was something you don't read about in history books: cannibalism.
Cannibalism as such is very difficult for us perhaps to take on board, but these people are in dire straits. They are dying. They have to eat something, and they weren't willing to give in because they realized that perhaps they themselves would be slaughtered should they give in.
All 30 Scottish prisoners disappeared as the remaining English troops ate their way through them. But the tasty prisoners didn't prove much of a feast. 2 months later, the siege was over, when once again, the castle was out of food. This time, the English surrendered. The siege had lasted 11 months, but it was the act of cannibalism that shocked the triumphant Scottish army.
If you were a starving soldier, you hadn't had a decent piece of meat for months, and you saw a nice tasty Scotsman passing, I think if it was a question of being able to keep alive, why not? Because I don't think anybody was going to say or point the finger. It was too late by that stage.
The events of 1316 may all but be forgotten, but the castle remains a testament to the armies that fought, died, and eventually ate within its protective walls. Sometimes a country's landscape will cover up its gruesome secrets. The only clue to the bloodthirsty past of Germany's Rhine Valley are the amazing castles that still govern the landscape. In fact, one 35-mile stretch of the Rhine can lay claim to the world's highest density of castles.
To go up and down the Rhine River and know the history that's taken place here over the last 1,000, 1,200, 1,400 years, it's awe-inspiring. And to see the churches, to see the castles, and understand all the history involved, it's breathtaking. It truly is.
Some German castles, like Castle Reichenstein, situated just outside Mainz, became a place of fear as it played host to marauding gangs of robber knights. Many of the castles built on the Rhine in medieval times acted as border control. Knights were placed in charge of the castles and had responsibility for collecting border tolls. Unfortunately, not all the knights were honorable men, and some castles levied ridiculous tolls that, if not paid, resulted in death.
Knights would inflict illicit tolls on the rivers and roads, and this is particularly true of the Rhine, where you could build a castle, stop the traffic, and levy a toll. So this was a very profitable form of blackmail.
Today, only tour groups inhabit this castle.
Welcome to Castle Reichenstein. This castle is over 1,000 years old.
But back in 1277, Dietrich von Hohenfels lived at the castle. At the time, he was infamous throughout Germany as the leader of a gang of prolific and murderous robber knights.
Dietrich was the last robber knight we had here. And he was greedy. He and his 8 sons always were going down, taking the chips and taking the money. If you don't want to give your money to them, they would catch you and chop your head off.
5 years after Dietrich began creating havoc for any passing traveler, the king of what was then Germany, Rudolf von Habsburg, decided enough was enough.
Action was taken against somebody who went too far, which obviously Dietrich of Hohenfels really did. It came under a system of peacekeeping associations, which had been introduced early in the 12th century. And it always specifically said, you know, if you get some sort of delinquent knight of this kind, then the locals must besiege the castle for 3 days.
In the 13th century, Castle Reichenstein was one of the biggest and one of the best castles to defend. But after the siege had lasted for several weeks, Dietrich von Hohenfels finally accepted his fate.
Eventually, they have to surrender too. And most of the people were hanged here on the trees you see here.
These were violent times, and Dietrich had consistently robbed and murdered the passing merchants. But the king, in a fit of compassion, decided to give Dietrich a chance.
He said, okay, all your sons will stand in a row. The oldest one first, and then to the youngest, 8 sons.
And that's where the compassion ended. King Rudolf von Habsburg then explained to Dietrich that he would have his head chopped off, and any son he could walk past headless would be spared their own death.
This is unusual, in fact, to impose executions on somebody quite so high-ranking.
But apparently Dietrich was beheaded, only for the headless murderer to walk unaided past all his sons. The king was spooked and fled, while locals were said to have constructed a church in memory of the bloody events.
I was thinking that if you had to pay each castle to pass, well, traveling back in the Middle Ages on the Rhine must have been pretty expensive.
Further up the Rhine is the town of Koblenz. It's here that the Rhine meets the Mosel, and it's also the home to Castle Ehrenbreitstein. Standing 400 feet above the river, Ehrenbreitstein is a daunting testament to Germany's military power over the past 900 years.
It's absolutely breathtaking, and to understand that everything we read about in our history books kind of comes alive when you're over here, some 3,000 miles away from America. It's truly, truly awe-inspiring.
Built on a cliff edge, this castle dominates the town. Local historian Manfred Buckling has extensively explored the castle.
So this model gives a good impression of the dimensions of the fortress Ehrenbreitstein. This fortress was built on a steep outcliff on the right bank of the Rhine. Here you can see the position of the Rhine.
The castle's defenses are truly awesome and have ensured that it has never been overrun. We were given exclusive access to the defense tunnels that run under the castle. These tunnels stretch for nearly 2 miles and were designed to prevent enemies digging under the castle's defense system.
So there are about 4 meters of earth above us. Now we've reached one of the ends of this countermine system. See, this is the pure soil in the area of this fortress. In case of an attack, perhaps they would have enlarged this, they would have dug further parts of this tunnel towards the enemy, of course.
And far from being just a tourist attraction, this castle has witnessed the age of modern warfare when during the Second World War, the castle's defenses were put to good use by civilians escaping the Allied bombing. And we can reveal that the castle actually owes its very existence to the U.S. Army. It was General Terry Allen's intervention at the end of World War I that prevented the destruction of the castle. And it became the inspiration behind the U.S. Army of Occupation of Germany medal. On the medal, the American eagle is depicted standing on Castle Ehrenbreitstein. The Rhine Valley is as unique as it is beautiful. This helps disguise its bloody past. although the castles along the river honor this in a magnificent way. Over time, the image of the imposing castle has lent itself to many myths and legends. But in reality, the true history of these fearsome buildings is far more gruesome. And the castles still standing today have succeeded in leaving an unforgettable mark on history.